In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. So this story we just heard in the Gospel of Jesus taking a boat trip across the Lake of Galilee when a storm came up. And we have a curious situation. Storm comes up, and the waves are beating against the boat, and all these very experienced sailors and fishermen panic. They're just going nuts, terrified in the storm. And meanwhile, Jesus was in the stern on a cushion, asleep. And they came and they, I'm sure, shook him and woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Now, they'd been with Jesus for a while. Did they really think he didn't care? But they're panicked. They are afraid, and fear is driving everything they do at that point. So then we have this miracle story. Jesus rebukes the wind and tells the sea to be calm, and it does. The wind stops blowing, the sea calms down. And he says to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they ask the big question that we always want to ask: who is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? Which is usually where we get hung up on this, because we can't explain how he made the sea stop or the wind stop. We still can't explain how he did it. But I'm more interested in the other part. How was it that in the middle of the storm, the sea raging, the waves crashing over the boat, Jesus could sleep as if he didn't have a care in the world, like a baby? And it's instructive how he responded to them in their fear and panic. He didn't say, "Hey, don't worry, I've taken care of it." He said, "Why are you being afraid? Have you still no faith?" Now, I've said tons of time, faith can be understood a number of ways, but the primary understanding of the word itself is trust. And in the story, you see Jesus' faith in a very natural way. For Jesus to have complete trust in the Father, he could go to sleep and he wasn't going to worry about it. He had given everything, his entire life, to God. His faith was complete. And it wasn't like nothing bad could happen, but he knew that no matter what happened, God was already there with him, that he could trust God through anything. Now, it's typical of us who don't quite have that down to see someone who really has complete faith and to say, "You must not care because he's not worrying." How many times have we been upset, something going on, and we're tearing our hair out, and we look around to somebody else, and what do we want them to do? We want them to tear their hair out too. We want them to get upset, and we want them to go crazy. But Jesus was demonstrating the kind of behavior that someone with really full faith would have. He wasn't worried. And they interpreted it, "You don't care." Of course, what we've seen in the gospel before, what we see in the gospel after this story is that Jesus does care. He absolutely cares about every person and everything. But he doesn't worry. He doesn't fret. And he doesn't let fear rule his life. His faith in God means that love, remember? The summary of the law, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. That's what rules his life through his faith. And fear, while it's not absent, has no hold on him. That's faith. That's what faith, really full faith, looks like. Now, we see another example of the same sort of problem in the epistle today. Paul is writing to the Corinthians, church in Corinth, and they've got kind of a problem. They have been baptized, they've given their life to Christ, but they're not fully there yet. They've got one foot in each world. They want to follow Jesus, they want to love God, but they're going to hedge their bets. They're going to hang on to something else at the same time. So their commitment is partial. It's very reminiscent of the story in the Old Testament, not the one we heard today, but the one that involves Elijah with the contest on Mount Carmel. Because back in the days of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, the people were syncretistic. They were worshipers of Yahweh, the Lord God of Israel, but they were hedging their bets. They were also practicing the Canaanite fertility religions. They worshipped also Baal, the Canaanite god of the thunderstorm, and they worshipped Astarte, the feminine god of the earth and of reproduction. Hedging their bets. Well, we like Yahweh, but do the thing for Baal and Astarte, and maybe that'll make sure our crops grow and it rains enough. So the whole thing of the contest on Mount Carmel was Elijah saying, okay, who's going to bring rain? Is it going to be Yahweh or is it going to be Baal? But he prefaced the whole thing by turning to the people of Israel and he's saying to them, how long are you going to go limping along in two directions? How long are you going to go limping along in two directions? This is what the Corinthians was doing. And this is what we almost always do. We're going to hedge our bets. We want to love God and we want to follow God, but you also want to make sure that you've got a little nest egg put aside and that you've got friends in high places or whatever it is you need just to make sure. Because, if you trust God all the way, things can happen. Paul writes about this. Does he say, if you trust God all the way, bad things will not happen? He does not. What does he say? But as servants of God, we have commended ourselves in every way through great endurance in afflictions, hardships, calamities, beatings, imprisonments, riots, labors, sleepless nights, hunger. That doesn't sound like a picnic, does it? Doing the work of God is not always and frequently not easy and can come with its own hardships. God doesn't promise us ease and comfort. God promises us life. God promises to be with us in our life all the way. And that no matter what life brings, whether good or ill, we're in God's hands. We can trust God no matter what. When I was dealing with cancer now 19 years ago, one of the hardest things that I needed to deal with at the time was trying to really trust God even if I was going to die soon. It was really hard. All of us are afraid to die, and that fear can be paralyzing. And I worked really hard on trying to say to myself, whether I live or die, I can trust God in this life. And I don't have to be afraid of what's going on. And what was wonderful was for a brief period of time I got there. and had strange things. I used to get really nervous on plane flights. I quit getting nervous. I said, well, if the plane doesn't make it, it doesn't make it. But what bothers me now after 19 years of health is that I'm starting to forget that. I'm starting to worry again about, well, what happens if something, if I get in a wreck, or if something happens next year and I get sick again or whatever. And I forget that I can trust God with my life all the way. And that I don't have to hold something back just in case. That I can trust God, and therefore I can serve God with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my mind, and with all my strength. That's what Jesus was trying to get his disciples to. It's what Paul was trying to get the Corinthians to. There is no restriction in our affections, he said, but only in yours. In return, I speak to you as children. Open wide your hearts also. Stop holding back. Don't keep limping along in two directions. Now just think, similar to what our presiding bishop said at the royal wedding when he talked about the way of love, what would the world look like if we all really did that? If fear no longer held any hold over us and we could trust God all the way, what would the world look like? Would we be in fear of people crossing our borders, not knowing who they are, what they would do? Would we be more inclined to help them because they're human beings who might be in need? Would we be in fear that, well, the economy's going good today, but it could turn down? What about this trade war? What is it going to do to my job? Am I going to lose? What am I going to do? What would the world look like if fear was not the factor? If love guided everything, because we could trust God with our lives 100%. Wouldn't that be the world you want to live in? I know it's the world that God intends for us to live in. So as Jesus and Paul implore us, open wide your heart. Trust God with all your heart. And don't hold back. Amen.